The prison gate opened at 8:17 on a cold Monday morning. Daniel Mercer stepped through it carrying a small canvas bag, a folded release document, and one photograph he had kept for 10 years. Laura stood beside him in it, younger, smiling, her head resting against his shoulder. Daniel stopped beyond the gate and looked back once. 10 years. In his fantasies, Laura would be waiting with tears in her eyes. She would run toward him and whisper that she had never stopped loving him. Instead, a silver sedan waited across the street. Laura was behind the wheel. When Daniel approached, she stepped out slowly. She looked older than the woman in the photograph, but that was not what struck him. It was the way she held herself, carefully, cautiously, as if every movement had been rehearsed. Daniel. His name came out quietly. He smiled. Laura. For several seconds, neither moved. Then she offered him a brief hug. It lasted barely long enough to be called an embrace. Daniel expected a reunion. Instead, he had been given a warning disguised as silence. Daniel felt the difference immediately. On the drive home, Laura kept both hands on the steering wheel. She answered questions about the house and neighborhood. Daniel listened, studying her reflection in the windshield. There were gaps in her answers. When he asked whether she had stayed in their old house, she hesitated before saying yes. When he asked whether anyone had helped her while he was gone, she simply said, "People did." "Who?" She tightened her fingers around the wheel. "Friends." Daniel smiled, but there was no warmth behind it. At the house, he noticed another change. The living room looked familiar, yet felt nothing like his. His old chair was gone. The photographs from their early marriage had disappeared from the walls. A new lock had been installed on the back door. Laura saw him looking. "I had to make some changes," she said. Daniel nodded. "I understand." But he didn't. Laura prepared dinner while Daniel sat silently at the table. She moved around the kitchen nervously, avoiding his eyes. Twice, her phone vibrated on the counter. Twice, she ignored it. The third time, Daniel glanced toward the screen. Laura noticed. She picked up the phone immediately and carried it into the hallway. When she returned, Daniel was still sitting exactly where she had left him. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes." Another pause. "Who was it?" "No one." Daniel looked at her for several seconds. Then he lowered his eyes and smiled. He did not ask again. That night, while Laura slept behind a closed bedroom door, Daniel remained awake in the darkness. He took the old photograph from his bag and studied Laura's younger face. Then he looked toward the hallway. For 10 years, prison had taught him patience. And now, for the first time since his release, Daniel understood that Laura was hiding something. He decided he would not force the truth from her. He would wait. He would watch. Eventually, she would show him everything. Daniel kept his promise to himself. He watched. He watched Laura leave for work each morning, watched her return before sunset, and noticed the small rituals that had replaced the life they once shared. She checked the locks twice. She kept her phone face down. She never left personal papers lying around. None of it proved anything. But Daniel had spent 10 years learning that suspicion did not need proof to survive. 10 years earlier, his life had collapsed in a single night. Daniel had come home unexpectedly and found Laura with another man, Michael Reed, in the house they had shared. What followed had never been fully explained. Daniel claimed Michael attacked him first. Prosecutors argued that Daniel had attacked him after discovering the affair. Michael died before reaching the hospital, and Daniel was sentenced to 10 years for manslaughter. During the trial, Laura had testified that Daniel had always been jealous, but she also admitted Michael had been in their home that night. Daniel remembered her tears more than the verdict. For years, he convinced himself that prison was the price of loving the wrong woman. Laura had continued writing to him during his sentence. At first, the letters arrived every week. She told him about ordinary things, the weather, the garden, repairs around the house. She promised that when he came home, they would figure everything out. Then the letters changed. They became shorter, then monthly, then occasional. Eventually, there were none. Daniel never forgot the silence. Now, sitting at Laura's kitchen table, He wondered what had filled those empty years. One afternoon, while Laura was at work, Daniel noticed an envelope tucked beneath a stack of bills. His name was not on it. Neither was Laura's. He did not open it. Instead, he memorized the return address. That evening, Laura caught him staring at the envelope. "Were you looking for something?" she asked. Daniel smiled. "No, just trying to understand how much has changed." She took the envelope and slipped it into a drawer. "You don't need to understand everything." The words stayed with him. That night, Daniel searched through the memories he had carried from prison. He remembered Laura's promises. He remembered Michael's face. He remembered every letter that had stopped coming. But now another thought appeared. Maybe Laura had not simply moved on. Maybe she had built a life around a secret. The possibility became an obsession. He replayed their conversations at night, searching every pause for meaning. Every imagined detail of Laura's life without him felt like another betrayal. Soon, knowing became the only thing he believed could save him from Laura. Daniel began noticing things he might once have ignored. Unfamiliar numbers on Laura's phone, a second key on her ring, receipts from places she never mentioned. He started recording dates in a small notebook. Laura's movements became a pattern. Daniel's resentment became something heavier. He no longer wanted only to know what Laura had hidden. He wanted back the years he believed she had stolen from him. And as that desire hardened inside him, Daniel began preparing to uncover the truth, no matter what the truth cost. He believed patience would reveal everything. What he did not understand was that some secrets were already dangerous enough to destroy the people who carried them. The thought of secrets stayed with Daniel, growing darker. By the end of the week, he had stopped pretending that he was simply trying to rebuild his marriage. One evening, Laura found him standing beside the spare bedroom, holding a box she had kept untouched for years. "I'm staying here," he said. Laura stared at him. "For how long?" Daniel looked toward the hallway, then back at her. "I'm your husband." The words were calm, but Laura heard the threat. "You haven't lived here in 10 years, and I'm still legally married to you." Laura knew he was right. During Daniel's imprisonment, she had considered filing for divorce more than once, but guilt always stopped her. She had promised him she would wait. Now that promise felt like a chain around her neck. "I need time," she whispered. "So do I." Daniel moved his belongings into the spare room that morning. Laura did not argue. Part of her felt responsible for what had happened to him. Another part remembered the man he had been before prison. The jealousy, the accusations, the sudden anger whenever he believed someone was getting too close to her. She told herself his behavior was the result of 10 difficult years. But Daniel did not behave like a man grateful to be home. He behaved like a man inspecting territory he believed belonged to him. Where had she been? Who had she spoken to? Why had she taken so long at the grocery store? Why did she need to visit her sister twice in 1 week? At first, Laura answered each question. Then the questions multiplied. Daniel began checking the household bills, asking why certain purchases had been made. He wanted to know how much money she had saved and whether anyone else had access to her accounts. When Laura protested, Daniel became quiet. "I spent 10 years wondering whether you were replacing me," he said. "The least you can do is tell me the truth." Laura looked away. "I didn't replace you." Daniel studied her face. "Then you shouldn't have anything to hide." The sentence became a rule. Laura stopped mentioning friends. She stopped making plans. She learned that peace inside the house depended on how much information she gave Daniel before he could demand it. Then, one Thursday evening, her phone lit up on the kitchen counter. Daniel saw the name before Laura could reach it. "Michael." His expression changed. Laura grabbed the phone. "It's nothing." Daniel stood. "Michael who?" "No one you need to worry about." Daniel laughed once, quietly. "That's what you said before." Laura froze. He was talking about the night that had sent him to prison. "Daniel, please. Does he call you often?" "No." "Then why is his name there?" Laura couldn't answer immediately. Daniel stepped closer, waiting. Finally she said, "He's someone I know." The answer was enough. That night, after Laura went upstairs, Daniel remained alone in the dark kitchen. He opened his notebook and wrote one name across a blank page. Michael. Underneath it, he wrote the date. For the first time since leaving prison, Daniel no longer wondered whether Laura had hidden another man from him. Now he believed she had. And somewhere in the house, Laura's phone lit up again. Michael's name remained in Laura's mind long after the phone stopped ringing. She barely slept that night. Daniel had said nothing more, but his silence frightened her more than an argument would have. The next morning, she woke feeling unusually weak. Her throat hurt, her body ached, and a fever had settled over her like a heavy blanket. She blamed stress. For several weeks, however, the symptoms returned. Some mornings she could barely get out of bed. She developed recurring infections that seemed to disappear and then return without warning. Daniel noticed her exhaustion, but his concern felt strangely measured. "You should see a doctor," he said one morning. Laura looked at him. "Since when do you care?" Daniel's expression tightened. "I'm your husband." The word made her uncomfortable. She finally scheduled an appointment. At the clinic, the doctor asked questions about her recent health, medications, and relationship history. Laura answered carefully, embarrassed by how little she understood about what was happening to her. Blood tests were ordered, and she was told that some results would take longer than others. 3 days later, the doctor asked her to return. Laura knew immediately that something was wrong. The room seemed smaller when she sat down. "There are some results we need to discuss," the doctor said gently. Laura stared at the papers in front of him. "What is it?" The doctor paused before answering. "Your HIV test came back positive." For several seconds, Laura heard nothing. The words seemed impossible. She stared at him, waiting for him to correct himself. "Are you sure? The result needs confirmation, and we will arrange additional testing, but we have to take this seriously." Laura's hands began trembling. "How?" The doctor explained that HIV could be transmitted in several ways and that further medical evaluation was necessary. He encouraged her to focus on getting appropriate care and reminded her that treatment could help people living with HIV manage the condition. But Laura barely heard him. Her mind had already returned to Daniel. She had been with him since his release. Before that, she had trusted him for years. The thought that he could have exposed her felt more frightening than the diagnosis itself. When she returned home, Daniel was sitting in the living room. "You look pale," he said. Laura placed her bag on the floor. "I got my test results." Daniel looked at her. "What kind of results?" She swallowed. "They found HIV." For one moment, something crossed Daniel's face. It disappeared instantly. "What?" His voice sounded surprised, but his eyes were different. Laura noticed. Daniel stood and walked toward her. "Are you sure?" "The doctor said they need confirmation." Daniel looked away. Then he asked a question that made her stomach tighten. "When did they test you?" "Why does that matter?" "It doesn't. I'm just asking." Laura studied him. He seemed concerned, but there was something beneath it. Not confusion. Not disbelief. Recognition. That night, Laura searched through old memories, trying to understand where the infection could have come from. She remembered Daniel's questions about her phone. She remembered his obsession with Michael. She remembered how quickly he had accepted her return home. Then another memory surfaced. Months before his release, Daniel had stopped answering questions about his health. Laura had assumed prison made him private. Now, sitting alone in the darkness, she wondered whether she had mistaken secrecy for shame. For the first time, a possibility took shape in her mind. Daniel might have known. And if he had known, Laura needed to discover how long he had been keeping that secret. She watched him from across the kitchen, searching his face for something he would not willingly reveal. "Did you know?" Daniel looked up from his coffee. "Know what?" "About HIV." The room became completely still. Daniel slowly placed the cup on the table. "Why would you ask me that?" "Because you didn't look surprised yesterday." His expression hardened. "You think I did this to you?" "I think you know something you're not telling me." Daniel stood. "I spent 10 years in prison while you built another life. And now you're accusing me?" I haven't accused you of anything. You don't have to. His voice rose. Laura stepped backward. Daniel walked toward the window and stared outside. Prison changes a man, he said. You learn what people really are when nobody cares whether you survive. Laura watched him carefully. I wrote to you. At first. I waited. You stopped. I couldn't live my whole life inside a prison cell with you. Daniel turned around. There it is. What? You couldn't wait. Laura's eyes filled with tears. I was alone. So was I. You were in prison because someone died. Daniel's face tightened. Because you betrayed me. I never killed anyone. But you helped create the life that put me there. Laura shook her head. You're blaming me for your choices. Daniel laughed bitterly. For 10 years, I had nothing except time. Time to remember your promises. Time to read your letters. Time to realize they became shorter because your life was getting better without me. I was trying to survive. And I was surviving too. His voice suddenly became quiet. That is what you don't understand. Laura looked at him. What don't I understand? I lost everything because of you. No. You lost everything because you chose violence. Daniel stared at her for several seconds. Then he smiled. You still think you're innocent. Laura felt a chill. What does that mean? It means people eventually pay for what they do. Her breathing became shallow. You think I deserve this? Daniel did not answer. His silence was worse than an accusation. Laura moved toward the door. I need to go. You're afraid of me. Yes. The answer seemed to surprise him. For a moment, something almost human appeared in his expression. Then it vanished. You should have been afraid before I came home. Laura stopped. What are you saying? Daniel stepped closer. You thought those 10 years would erase what happened. I never forgot. No, you just learned to live without me. She stared at him, finally understanding something she had refused to accept. Daniel had not returned because he wanted their marriage back. He had returned because he wanted something from her. Something more permanent than an apology. That evening, Laura locked herself in the bathroom and searched her medical paperwork. Her pulse raced as she remembered every unanswered question from the past few frightening weeks inside their home. Her hands shook as she read the dates. Then she remembered Daniel's strange reaction when she told him about the test. It had not been surprise. It had been recognition. She opened her phone and began searching for information about HIV transmission, testing, and medical records. She knew she needed facts before confronting him again. Outside the bathroom, footsteps stopped. Laura froze. Daniel's voice came through the door. Laura? She didn't answer. A few seconds passed. Then he said quietly, You should stop looking for answers. Her blood ran cold. He walked away. Laura stared at the locked door. Now she knew her suspicion was no longer something she could dismiss. The question was no longer whether Daniel was hiding a secret. It was what he had done with it. The question was no longer what Daniel had done with his secret. It was whether he had planned for Laura to discover it at all. The next morning, Laura waited until Daniel left the house before beginning her search. She started with the simplest place. The old files she had kept from his imprisonment. Letters, court documents, visitation records, and paperwork from the prison were packed inside a cardboard box in the attic. For hours, she searched through everything. Most of it contained nothing useful. Then she found a medical authorization form dated 8 months before Daniel's release. Her hands began to shake. The document mentioned a confidential medical consultation and follow-up care. Laura stared at the date. Daniel had never told her about it. She searched deeper and found another document, this one referring to counseling provided through the prison's medical department. There were pages she could not fully understand, but one phrase appeared repeatedly: infectious disease care. Laura's breathing became shallow. She remembered Daniel's silence when she had asked about his health before his release. She remembered how quickly he had changed the subject. She remembered his expression when she told him about her diagnosis. Recognition. Not surprise. Recognition. Laura placed the documents on the floor and sat beside them. A terrible possibility was becoming harder to ignore. Daniel might have known about his condition before he came home. She needed certainty. She contacted the prison administration and requested information, but because of privacy restrictions, much of what she wanted remained inaccessible. Still, the existence of the medical records confirmed something important. Daniel's story had not been complete. That evening, he returned carrying groceries. "I thought we could have dinner together," he said. Laura looked at him cautiously. "That sounds nice." Daniel smiled. For a moment, he seemed like the husband she remembered. "I've been thinking," he said. "Maybe I've been too hard on you." Laura said nothing. "I don't want to fight anymore." He reached for her hand. She allowed him to touch it, though every instinct told her to pull away. "I love you, Laura." The words frightened her. She had heard them before, but now they sounded different. Later that night, Daniel apologized for his behavior. The following morning, he accused her of hiding something. By afternoon, he was angry because she had not answered one of his calls. That evening, he apologized again. The cycle repeated. Love, accusation, apology, threat, love again. Laura began understanding that his tenderness was not separate from his cruelty. They were parts of the same weapon. One night, Daniel found her looking through old paperwork. "What are you searching for?" "Nothing." He stepped closer. "You've been acting strange." "I've been sick." "You're always sick now." Laura looked at him. "What do you mean?" Daniel's expression changed. "I mean you're letting fear control you." She quietly closed the folder. Daniel took it from her. "Don't dig into things you don't understand." "Why?" "Because you might find something you can't live with." Laura stared at him. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Daniel softened. "I don't want to lose you." His voice sounded almost sincere. Laura wanted to believe him. Instead, she remembered the documents hidden upstairs. After Daniel went to bed, she returned to the attic and opened the box again. Beneath the medical paperwork, she discovered an old prison contact sheet containing names and dates. One name appeared beside Daniel's final year inside. Monica Reyes. Laura had never heard it before. She copied the number listed beside the name and stared at it. For the first time, she had someone outside the marriage who might know what happened to Daniel before he came home. She picked up her phone. Then she hesitated. If Monica knew the truth, contacting her could change everything. Laura finally pressed call. The phone rang once, twice. Then a woman's voice answered. "Who is this?" Laura swallowed. "My name is Laura Mercer. I think you knew my husband." There was a long silence. Then Monica whispered, "You shouldn't be calling me about Daniel." "You shouldn't be calling me about Daniel." Laura tightened her grip on the phone. "Why?" Monica hesitated. "Because if he knows I spoke to you, he won't be happy." "Please," Laura whispered. "I need to understand what happened before he came home." Another silence followed. Then Monica gave her an address. "Tomorrow, 10 in the morning. Come alone." The line went dead. Laura barely slept. The next morning, she told Daniel she had an appointment and drove across town. Monica was waiting inside a small cafe near the courthouse. She looked nervous, repeatedly checking the window as though expecting someone to appear. "You're Laura," she said. "Yes." Monica studied her face. "You look exactly like the photographs he showed me." Laura's stomach tightened. "What photographs?" "Yours." Monica sat down. "I worked at the prison for several years. I wasn't his counselor, but I saw Daniel often during his final year. He changed near the end." "How?" "He became obsessed with getting out." Laura frowned. "He always wanted his release. This was different." Monica lowered her voice. "He talked about revenge." Laura felt the room becoming colder. "Against whom?" "You." Laura stared at her. "Me?" Monica nodded. "He talked about how you had abandoned him. He said you had built a life while he was suffering. Sometimes he sounded angry. Other times he sounded almost calm." "What did he say?" Monica looked away. "He kept saying you owed him everything." Laura's eyes filled with tears. "Did he ever say why?" He believed your life belonged to him because he had sacrificed 10 years for what happened between you. Laura remembered Daniel's words. People eventually pay for what they do. Monica continued. He also talked about coming home as if it were a mission. He had plans, places he wanted to go, things he wanted to settle. Did he mention my health? Monica's expression changed. Why are you asking? Laura swallowed. Because I'm HIV positive. Monica became completely still. Did Daniel know? I think he did. Monica looked genuinely frightened. There were medical discussions while he was inside. I can't tell you exactly what they were about, but I remember seeing him leaving the medical wing more than once. Laura felt sick. Was he diagnosed? I don't know, but he knew something. For several minutes, Monica described Daniel's final months in prison. He had become secretive, withdrawn, and strangely patient. He kept lists and dates. He talked about Laura as though she were not his wife but someone who had committed an offense against him. Before they separated, Monica reached into her bag. I have something else. She pulled out a folded sheet of paper. There was a woman he mentioned repeatedly. I never knew who she was. Laura looked at the paper. What woman? Monica's voice dropped. He called her the person who owed him everything. Laura stared at the words. Then Monica's phone vibrated. She looked at the screen and immediately stood. I have to go. Wait, you said there was more. There is. Then tell me. Monica shook her head. Not here. She walked away without explaining. That afternoon, Laura sent her 3 messages. No response. She called twice. Straight to voicemail. By evening, Monica's number was unreachable. Laura sat alone at her kitchen table, staring at the prison contact sheet. Daniel had known about her before his release. He had spoken about revenge. He had planned something. And now the only person who could explain what that plan was had disappeared from her life. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Laura looked toward the ceiling. Daniel was home. She quickly hid the documents. Then she heard his footsteps descending the stairs. For the first time, Laura wondered whether Monica had stopped answering because something had happened to her. And if Daniel had discovered their conversation, Laura knew she might be next. The footsteps stopped halfway down the stairs. Laura stood in the kitchen, one hand pressed against the hidden documents inside her sweater. Daniel appeared in the doorway. Who were you talking to? No one. He studied her face. You're lying. Did you know? Daniel said nothing. Before you came home, she continued. Did you know you were HIV positive? His jaw tightened. Where did you get that idea? From the records you hid. From Monica. The name changed everything. Daniel's expression became cold. You spoke to Monica. Yes. What did she tell you? That you planned revenge. She doesn't understand what happened. Then explain it. You want an explanation? I want the truth. Daniel stepped farther into the kitchen. The truth is that you left me alone for 10 years. I didn't put you in prison. You betrayed me. I tried to visit you. I wrote to you. Until you stopped. Because I was trying to survive. Daniel slammed his hand against the table. Laura flinched. You think you were the only one suffering? No, she said. But I never used my suffering to hurt you. His eyes narrowed. You built a life without me. I was allowed to live. You were supposed to wait. I was your wife, Daniel, not your prisoner. Daniel stared at her. Then he spoke quietly. You have no idea what prison does to someone. Maybe not, but I know what you've done since coming home. I came back because I loved you. No, you came back because you wanted control. Daniel shook his head. You destroyed everything I had. And you decided I deserved to suffer for it. Laura stepped closer. Did you infect me on purpose? Daniel's silence answered more than words could. Laura covered her mouth. Oh my God. It wasn't that simple. You knew. I knew I was sick. When? Before I was released. Laura's face went pale. You knew before you touched me. I wanted you to understand what it felt like to lose control. You made my illness a punishment. I wanted you to feel what I felt. Laura backed toward the counter. I trusted you. Daniel moved toward her. You trusted the man you remembered. He doesn't exist anymore. Then stay away from me. She reached for her phone. Daniel grabbed her wrist. Give me that. Let go. She struggled. Laura, stop. Help. The phone fell and struck the floor. Laura tried to pull away, but Daniel shoved her. She hit the edge of the counter and collapsed. Laura did not move. Laura? He knelt beside her and touched her shoulder. There was no response. He looked toward the fallen phone, then toward the hallway. Fear replaced anger. He knew what would happen if anyone discovered the truth. Daniel began constructing a story. Laura had been sick. She had been unstable. She had collapsed after an argument. He placed her medication nearby and wiped the surface where the struggle had occurred. But panic made him careless. Daniel noticed the broken phone. Laura's phone lay nearby, its screen still glowing faintly in the darkness. He picked it up, but the screen had cracked. He did not realize the recording application was still running. The device had captured fragments. Voices, shouting, a confession about his knowledge of the diagnosis, and the sound of Laura falling. Daniel hid the phone beneath a cushion and continued preparing the scene. Then he called emergency services. His voice trembled as he reported that his wife had collapsed. When responders arrived, Daniel stood in the doorway with tears on his face. I tried to help her, he said. Paramedics examined Laura while officers questioned Daniel. He repeated the same story. She had been sick. She had become upset. She suddenly fell. Then one paramedic noticed something Daniel had overlooked. A small smear marked the edge of the kitchen counter beneath Laura's position. It did not fit the story of a simple collapse. The first crack had appeared in the story he built. Daniel watched the vehicle disappear into the darkness. He believed the truth was buried with Laura. He was wrong. The first crack in Daniel's story appeared before the ambulance had disappeared. By the time Detective Olivia Grant arrived, Daniel had transformed himself into the grieving husband everyone expected. He sat quietly on the steps, insisting Laura had been struggling with her health for weeks. She wasn't herself, he said. The diagnosis frightened her. Olivia watched him carefully. How long had she been sick? About a month. And tonight, we argued. She became upset. Then she collapsed. His answers came quickly. Too quickly. Inside, officers photographed the kitchen. Olivia noticed the overturned phone, damaged counter, and medication nearby. She crouched beside the counter. Who moved this? Daniel appeared behind her. I did. Why? I was trying to help her. Olivia looked at him. Did you touch anything else? I don't think so. That answer stayed with her. At the station, Olivia reviewed the reports. Laura's medical condition did not explain the physical evidence. Then the medical examiner called. There are injuries inconsistent with a simple collapse, he said. Olivia closed her notebook. So we treat this as suspicious. Yes. She returned to the house with a warrant for Laura's digital devices and personal records. What they found changed the investigation. Laura had been keeping notes. Some were handwritten. Others were stored inside password-protected files. Several described Daniel's behavior. He checked her phone. He questioned her movements. He demanded financial information. Then Olivia found one sentence. He knows about my diagnosis, and I think he knew before I did. She stared at the screen. Another file contained dates and descriptions of arguments. One name appeared repeatedly. Daniel. Another appeared once. Monica Reyes. Olivia discovered that Monica had worked at Daniel's prison. That connection immediately became important. Investigators also recovered Laura's damaged phone. The device was damaged, but its data remained. A recording file was recovered. Olivia listened. Daniel's voice came through first. You have no idea what prison does to someone. Then Laura's voice. Did you infect me on purpose? A long silence followed. Then Daniel said something that changed the case. I knew I was sick. Olivia stopped the recording. She played it again. The statement was unmistakable. Daniel had claimed Laura suddenly collapsed during an argument. He had never mentioned discussing her diagnosis. Medical records created another contradiction. Daniel had received medical counseling during his final year in prison. Investigators found enough information to establish that he had received infectious disease care before release. Olivia began building a timeline. Daniel knew. Laura suspected. And somewhere between those two facts, something terrible had happened. Then Monica's name appeared again. Olivia contacted her. There was no answer. A second call went unanswered. Investigators learned Monica had stopped responding to Laura's messages. Olivia requested their communication records. The final message from Laura was brief. "Please call me. I know Daniel knew." Olivia leaned back in her chair. This was no longer simply a suspicious death. It looked like a pattern of fear and manipulation. Daniel had returned from prison carrying years of resentment and a carefully hidden grievance. Laura had spent her final days documenting what she believed was happening. And now the woman who might explain Daniel's prison history had disappeared from contact. Olivia looked at the evidence board, where every clue pointed toward Daniel. One question still remained unanswered. If Daniel had known about his condition before returning home, why had he deliberately chosen Laura at all? The answer, she suspected, was buried somewhere in the years he had spent behind prison walls. And to uncover it, she would have to find the person Daniel had never expected to speak. Investigators searched Laura's house again, this time looking for evidence of how she had lived during Daniel's return. In the bedroom, they found a small memory card hidden inside an old jewelry box. Contained recordings. Laura's voice filled the interview room, quiet and frightened. "I don't know who else to trust." Another recording followed. "He keeps asking where I go. He checks my phone. He says I owe him for the years he spent in prison." Olivia listened without interrupting. The recordings continued for weeks. Laura described arguments, threats, apologies, and Daniel's sudden changes in mood. Sometimes he sounded loving. Sometimes he sounded furious. She had begun documenting everything because she feared that one day nobody would believe her. The recordings revealed that Laura had begun sleeping with the bedroom door locked because she no longer felt safe around him. Then came the recording Olivia had been waiting for. "I think Daniel knew about his diagnosis before he came home." A medical investigator confirmed that Daniel had received infectious disease counseling while incarcerated. Daniel had learned about his condition before release. He had returned to Laura afterward, and Laura had become sick. But another discovery made the case darker. Investigators recovered fragments of deleted messages from Daniel's old phone. Many were damaged, but forensic technicians reconstructed enough to reveal conversations with people connected to the prison. Several messages had been erased shortly before Daniel's release. One contained a warning from an unidentified contact. "You need to leave the past alone." Another response from Daniel read, "I've waited long enough." The phrase sounded less like a personal grievance and more like preparation. Investigators searched further and found records showing that Daniel had made repeated attempts to contact former prison acquaintances during the months before his release. Some conversations concerned Laura. Others mentioned revenge. Daniel had apparently been constructing a narrative in which Laura was responsible for everything he had lost. Olivia placed the evidence on the timeline. 10 years earlier, Daniel had gone to prison after killing Michael during a violent confrontation. Years passed. Laura continued writing. Then her letters became less frequent. Daniel began talking about betrayal. During his final year, he received medical counseling and started discussing revenge. After his release, he moved directly back into Laura's home. He monitored her. He discovered her communications. He knew about his own diagnosis. Then Laura died. The murder suddenly seemed less like an explosion of anger and more like the final movement of something carefully developing. Daniel might not have returned home seeking reconciliation. He might have returned with a plan. His resentment had survived prison, growing quieter and more focused with every passing year. Laura's recordings provided the emotional story. The deleted messages provided the preparation. The medical records provided the missing knowledge. Together, they created a disturbing picture. Olivia ordered investigators to examine Daniel's prison correspondence, visitation records, medical history, and archived communications. If Daniel had been planning revenge before his release, there might be evidence buried among those records. Hours later, a technician brought Olivia another file. It was an old prison communication log from Daniel's final months. One name appeared repeatedly: Monica Reyes. Olivia stared at it. Monica had already disappeared from Laura's story. Now she was appearing again inside Daniel's. Olivia realized that whatever happened during Daniel's final months in prison might explain everything that followed. She ordered officers to find Monica immediately. But before they could locate her, Olivia received a message from another investigator. Monica had not simply stopped answering calls. She had left her home, and she had taken nothing with her. The interrogation room was silent when Daniel finally sat across from Detective Olivia Grant. For several minutes, neither spoke. Daniel looked tired, but not frightened. His hands rested calmly on the table. Olivia placed a folder between them. "Your wife kept recordings." Daniel looked at the folder. "Laura was sick." "That isn't what I asked." "She was frightened. She wasn't thinking clearly." Olivia studied him. "You told officers she collapsed after an argument." "She did. But the physical evidence says otherwise." Daniel leaned back. "Are you accusing me of killing my wife?" "I'm asking you to explain what happened." "There's nothing to explain." Olivia opened the folder. "We recovered recordings from Laura's phone and memory card. She documented your threats, your accusations, and your behavior after you came home." Daniel's expression changed slightly. "She hated me. She was afraid of you. She had reasons." Olivia paused. "Because you knew you were HIV positive before you came home." Daniel looked down. The silence lasted several seconds. Finally, he said, "Yes." Olivia watched him carefully. "When did you learn?" "While I was in prison." "And Laura didn't know?" "I didn't tell her." "Why?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "Because I didn't know what would happen." "You knew enough to receive medical counseling." "I was scared." Olivia leaned forward. "Were you scared? Or were you planning something?" Daniel looked directly at her. "I never planned to kill her." "But you knew you were infected." "Yes." "And you resumed a sexual relationship with Laura without telling her." Daniel said nothing. Olivia continued. "You knew the risk. You watched her become sick. Then, when she confronted you, you told her that she should be afraid." Daniel's eyes filled with anger. "She had no idea what I went through." "That doesn't answer my question." "She moved on." His fist struck the table. "She lived while I spent 10 years in that place." Olivia remained still. "You believe that justified what happened?" Daniel's breathing became heavier. "You don't understand." "Then explain it." He stared at the wall. "Every day, I imagined coming home. I imagined her waiting for me. I imagined that we would start again. And when she didn't, I realized she had forgotten me. She had survived without you." Daniel laughed bitterly. "That's what you call it? What do you call it?" "Betrayal." Olivia opened another file. "Laura's recording captured you saying she owed you everything." Daniel's face hardened. "She did. She owed you nothing. You weren't there. I wasn't. But I know what the evidence says." Daniel looked toward the door. For the first time, the confidence disappeared. Olivia placed the recovered phone recording on the table. "We also have you admitting that you knew you were sick." Daniel closed his eyes. "I didn't kill her. You caused the circumstances that led to her death." "I pushed her." The room went silent. Daniel swallowed. "I was angry. She kept calling me a monster. She tried to leave. I grabbed her. She fell. Then you staged the scene." "I panicked." "You lied." "Yes." "Why?" "Because I knew nobody would believe it was an accident." Olivia stared at him. "You wanted Laura to suffer." Daniel's voice became barely audible. "I wanted her to feel what I felt." "Helpless." "Yes." "Abandoned." "Yes." "Afraid." Daniel nodded. That was your revenge. He looked down at his hands. I never thought she would die. Olivia closed the folder. But she did. Daniel said nothing. The confession answered the question of how Laura died. But another question remained. When had revenge stopped being an emotion and become a plan? Olivia suspected the answer was hidden in Daniel's final year behind bars. And now investigators had to uncover the prison records that might reveal exactly when his desire for revenge began. Those records could show whether Laura's death was born in one violent moment, or whether Daniel had been preparing for it long before release. The courtroom finally reached the moment everyone had been waiting for. After months of evidence, accusations, denials, and painful revelations, Daniel was convicted for Laura's murder. The verdict brought a sense of finality, but it could never erase what had already been lost. The judge imposed a lengthy prison sentence, sending Daniel back into the prison environment he had once believed was responsible for ruining his life. This time, however, there was no uncertainty about why he was there. His own choices had brought him to that courtroom and ultimately to that cell. For Laura's family, the sentence was only one part of the aftermath. Justice had been delivered, but grief did not disappear when the gavel fell. They were left with memories, unanswered questions, and the painful knowledge that Laura's life had ended after a relationship that had slowly become more controlling and dangerous. Instead of allowing that pain to remain silent, her family chose to turn it into something that could help others. They established a support initiative dedicated to raising awareness about HIV, domestic abuse, and the experiences of people trapped in coercive relationships. Their goal was not simply to remember Laura, but to make sure others recognized warning signs before fear, isolation, and manipulation could become impossible to escape. Through education, support, and open conversations, Laura's story became a warning for people who might otherwise suffer in silence. Looking back, the pattern became painfully clear. Betrayal had created resentment. Resentment became obsession. Obsession developed into manipulation, and manipulation eventually crossed the line into violence. What began as a deeply personal conflict transformed into something far more devastating, leaving families, friends, and an entire community to confront the consequences. Yet perhaps the most haunting part of Laura's story came from her own recorded words. Her voice offered something that no courtroom argument could fully replace: her perspective. Listening to her, the tragedy felt less like a distant case and more like the story of a person desperately trying to hold onto her truth. Laura revealed that her greatest fear was not death itself. It was losing the ability to tell the truth about what had happened to her. Those words remained after everything else was finished, becoming her final message, and the bridge to the questions that would continue long after the courtroom doors closed.